Hey everyone, this is Joanna with the Prosperous Agency / Joanna Realty here with some information on pricing your home right. Now I do have a whole book of material here that I could go on and on talking about. However, I want to make it as short as possible just so you understand that pricing your home right matters a lot. So for both a buyer's agent and a listing agent, it's very important that they understand the market, that they know the neighborhoods, that they know what is it exactly that they have to do to price your home to where you can get the most for your, from your buyer and the most out of your equity. So this is what's going on. Some of people that I have talked to are looking a lot at tax assessments. They're also looking on Zillow. Now, I'm going to touch Zillow in a fairly short amount of time. However, please do not look at the tax assessments when pricing your property. So this is geared towards agents as well as sellers, as well as buyers in some ways, but obviously more towards listing agents and sellers, just because a lot of sellers tend to hire an agent. Either they know the person, which is great, but they don't really look at how many homes they've sold and what is the list price versus sales price, so they can see exactly where the agent is with the knowledge, right? So if I'm listing the house at $400,000 and it ends up selling at $375,000, there means there was a gap of $25,000. Either I didn't list it properly, or the sellers, I couldn't come to an agreement with the seller. The seller really thought that the house was worth so much more than it actually is worth. So ultimately, probably the house didn't appraise. So going back, when you are thinking about hiring an agent to list your house, please look at their experience and how many homes they have listed in the MLS in the past year and what is the price point that they have sold the house at versus what they have listed it at in the MLS initially. So now I'm going to start digging a little bit and tell you that when you look at tax records are assessed depending on county every 8 years. Now there are counties that are assessed every 4 years, but when an assessor goes out there to assess the property, they look at the unfinished house after the permits have been issued for the house. The building permit, they look, the house might not be finished, and then they kind of just do an evaluation, they review the builder's plans, and that's about it. So there's no real science behind what the assessor actually does. He might miss the fact that something else have been permitted ultimately after he was there. He might miss a 2-story foyer. He might miss a lot of things, and so please do not look at tax assessments when listing your house. Another thing that is very, very important is that when you are listing your house and you are signing a listing agreement with an agent, in that listing agreement, it's going to ask whether or not you're going to take a conventional loan, obviously cash, FHA, VA, USDA. Now, it's very important to remember that while you might think that you want to accept the FHA and the VA, because why not, you need to think about how much money you have in case you need to do repairs on that house, because the FHA and the VA loans are much more stringent than a conventional loan. So the appraiser, especially for a VA, it's very, very hard to fight a VA appraiser. I have been there on new construction, and it was a pain in my, because I've showed the comparables. However, their guidelines are very stringent and it's very, very hard, and 99% of the time we're not going to win that game against a VA appraisal. Now, FHA, I wanted to read to you something about FHA, which a lot of people might not know. FHA, you can close in 30 days. I've had many loans for my buyers closed in 30 days on an FHA, but things that are very important, red flags for the FHA appraiser, are very important for me to pass on, so you understand that if you accept an FHA, a buyer that has an FHA loan that wants to go on a contract with your property, The FHA appraiser is going to look at structure issues for the floor, framing and roof. They're going to look at the crawl space and at the basement, and they should be dry. They're going to look to make sure that the house has good drainage. Also, the private well systems are going to be tested. I'm telling you, I have a lot of information. There's no lead-based paint that is allowed in the house. So if you have a house that was built prior to 1978, that needs to be addressed. No rotted exterior wood and no cracked mortar. Also, if you have a roof that has not more than 2 years remaining on your roof years, probably you are in a better place considering replacing that roof. While the VA appraisal is fairly similar to the FHA appraisal, most of them come in low. They really do. And so if you don't have money for repairs, or if your roof is not new, please consider putting all those things in order before you actually go live with your house, just because, again, it might affect the appraised value, and then you're going to end up in a worse situation since the house is not going to appraise. For the conventional, we look at location, condition, and value. So I had a situation recently with a lender where it was a conventional loan. However, we have negotiated repairs, money for repairs, in lieu of repairs for our buyers. And the appraiser did come back asking us to specify exactly which were the repairs, which is, to be honest, which is the first time it happened to us. So on a conventional loan, we were able to negotiate repairs on and off and not necessarily have to provide the exact repairs that were needed. So this time around, we were asked to provide the list of repairs. There were no safety issues, there was no structural, there was nothing that was not, benefiting for the future our buyers. However, and the lender knew that. However, we still had to provide everything that needed to be done. Automated value models. Now, there's a lot of people, there's a lot of buyers who might go to their lender and say, hey, instead of paying $500 for whatever, $450 for the appraisal, can you just do a AVM, which is the automated value model, and just pay $80? I'm just saying a number, I'm not sure, I guess it depends on the lender. Can you just do that for me, and then I'm just going to skip that whole $500 part for appraising. Now, keep in mind, Zillow, and this is where I'm coming to Zillow and Zestimates. Zillow used to be pretty much off. Now they're getting much better. They are within 5% of actual price of a home. So this is the Zillow's estimate is within 5% of the sales price, 55% of the time in North Carolina. So you are looking at Zestimates, and 55% they are correct, within 5% of actual sales price. So now Zillow, based on what I'm hearing, has started looking into the MLS and pulling comps, which is actually much better. But nothing replaces the agent, nothing replaces the appraiser, nothing replaces my experience going into a house and saying, okay, while you, Mr. Seller, might think that your house is a palace, I see it as a regular house. The lender sees it as a, whatever, something that's going to be torn apart soon. So everyone has different ways of seeing the property, and so we all need to come together to common grounds and make sure that we represent you as a seller the best. So what do we look at as agents? We look at comparables. Obviously, everything that has closed within 60 days or 90 days, 6 months or so, within 1 mile radius. 2 comparables, at least out of 3, should have the same number of bedrooms. They should be within 20% of that square footage. So please do not compare a 3,500 square foot home to a 41, and do not take square footage just the way you think it should be. So if you're calculating 165, for example, per square foot, your house is smaller and the other house is bigger, you are not the safest. You know, obviously the agent is going to tell you exactly what we're looking at, and depending on how many upgrades you have. But you can just say, if they are at 165 per square foot, I'm going to just list mine at 165 per square foot, because again, you have to look at homes that are within not more than 20% of your square footage. So 20%, anything that exceeds is really not relevant. And if you are looking at 100 square feet difference, those are really not adjusted, not by the agents as much and not by the appraiser. Now you might ask yourself why we don't have a value, we don't have an answer to that. However, that's the reality of how it is. Comps should be also very similar in style, and appraisers will consider environmental and zoning issues. So, you know, you have to really look at everything. Also, what's something very interesting that that most people don't know is that land value should not exceed 30% of the total value. So if you have a house that is situated on 2 acres or so, and the other house is on half acre or 0.75 acres, you're not going to get that much more money on just because you have the land. So they are definitely focusing on the house, on the upgrades, more than they're actually focusing on the piece of land. Interesting, but that is the reality of what we've studied and what we hear from most appraisers. So obviously, even if you have a, you know, we're looking, I'm not going to get into all these details, but you know, Cher, for example, and how beautiful she looks, and she's, I'm not sure how old, let's just say she's 85 years old. And then you look at Cher, who's 85 years old, and then you look at another 85-year-old woman that doesn't look quite as good as Cher. So what's going on? Effective age is something that's very, it's a term that we use a lot. So when I go into a house that's 85 years old, I'm just going to compare the house to Cher, but the house has been updated, almost fully updated. I cannot compare that house to something else that's 85-year-old, because obviously if the house has new siding, has new roof, has a ton of grid updates, they've even went and took out all the plumbing and everything, so you can't really compare it to homes. I mean, yes, in the WakeGov it's going to show that it has the same square footage. However, the effective age, the way the house looks, is absolutely different than what the other house looks. So obviously we're looking at that as well, and you as a seller, you're going to say, yeah, I mean, my house is from 96, but I just put $73,000 in this and this and this and this. And remember, you never get dollar per dollar. Actually, I have something very interesting here for you. It says, and this is from the Remodeling magazine, and this is mostly for the basement, but basements and attics are pretty hot in our market. And listen to this. So the Remodeling magazine says, cost versus value report from 2018 has quoted an average, on average, a finished basement redo with a cost of $61,303 will have a 70.3% payback for its owner. So if you are investing $61,000 on your basement, it's never going to be 100%. Well, okay, I can't say never. I tend to be a little bit extreme, but if you're looking at a basement, you know, it might be $20 per square foot if it's unfinished. Then if it's a little bit finished, as in just a part of it, and it's heated and the rest is not unfinished, it could be anywhere between 35-40% of the value of the square footage. But it's not going to be much more. Now, maybe 70%, but we're going to give it 70% off of the square footage that's above grade level. But that basement needs to rock and roll. Like, you really need to have it finished. It needs to be obviously heated space. It needs to have, you know, doors to go out. It needs to be beautiful. Let's not go into details, but we as agents have seen enough, and we look at comparables with basements, and if we don't see comparable with basements, that's when the knowledge comes in, and that's when the seller might disagree, and he might think that, their home is so special, and we can come in and say, wait a minute, you do have 3, 5, 4, 100 additional square footage in your basement. However, this is what, based on all the guidelines appraisers are looking at, so you can't really take full price that you have above ground. And so kind of look at 40% to 70% for basement, and somewhere for the attic, look somewhere around 60% for the finished attic, usually not more than that. So I do have a lot of information here. I'm going to touch one more thing that I think is very important. So the attic, the ceiling slope has to be at least 50%. So 50% of the ceiling must be 7 feet or higher. It has to be finished in the same manner as the rest of the house, and it has to be heated and cooled with 2 exits, right? To be able to put a value on that. Now, nobody has taught us what value do you put on that. So us as agents with experience, we go and we determine what value to put on that finished attic, but there's no actual rule, right? So we use our common sense and our expertise. Unpermitted square footage is a very, very gray area. Now, most of the lenders that we have talked to and appraisers say that, very interesting. So the factors that they are looking at, pretty much they're looking at the lender. What is the lender saying? What is the lender dictating? This is what they're going to choose. Location and custom of the area can dictate how the public views unpermitted square footage, and has noticed that in rural areas it's not as much an issue as in more urban areas. So that's location, area is very important. And also, as I said, this particular appraiser said that since 95% of the time his client is the lender, I'm repeating, he's going to go with what the lender is saying, right, when it comes to unpermitted. Now, again, some lenders care, some lenders don't care. Me, as a listing agent, I have to disclose that that space has not been permitted. So if you have 3,000 square feet, out of which 700 have not been permitted, I'm going to have to put that in the MLS. I'm going to add it as a total square footage if it's heated, if it has an exit, if it's finished in the same way as the rest of the house has been finished. However, I need to disclose it prior to receiving an offer in the MLS. It's a material thing that needs to be disclosed. So if you're thinking about getting away from not disclosing something like that, and if you're not going to tell your agent, or if you simply forget because you have done it way back when you moved into the house 20 years ago, we're not really sure. Maybe the town of Cary or Wake County keeps permits for 7 years. Some permits you can find, some permits you can't find, but please be straightforward with your agent and let them know, because this is a material fact that needs to be disclosed, and it can affect you after the buyer comes on the contract and they can walk away. Let's not talk about what else can happen after if they decide to go after you for non-disclosement of a material fact. That being said, I think I'm going to finish here, just because I have a lot of material that I could touch here, but the most important thing is listing your house right. Pricing it right is extremely important. And again, I have done another video on hiring some companies out there that are going to tell you that they're going to sell your house fast with no hassle. Well, if no hassle and fast is okay with you, and losing 20, 30, 40K is also okay with you, then I think I'm going to not say anything and I'm not going to comment. Everybody can choose whatever they want to choose, but please understand that we're talking about a lot of money. This is Joanna Min with the Prosperous Agency, and if you know of anyone anyone that's considering selling or buying a house, I would love to talk to them. I would love to represent them. We're bringing years of knowledge and expertise to you, and we are doing an amazing job with listing our homes and marketing them the 21st century way, not only putting them in the MLS and bringing knowledge to you and passion, which is pretty darn important. Thank you so much for watching and have an amazing day.